Mark was a man who tried to keep peace in every situation, and he believed that avoiding attention was the easiest way to do that, which was why for years he never brought his wife Lena to any work event or gathering. He thought it was safer to keep their personal life away from the polished world he worked in, where people judged quickly and whispered even quicker. Lena never complained, though she felt the silence every time he left home dressed in his formal suit with the same tired excuse about it being a work thing. She understood he was nervous, but she could not ignore the ache she felt inside whenever he walked out of the door without her. Lena was a warm-hearted woman with gentle eyes and a calm voice. Her presence brought peace to anyone who met her. She worked long hours as a nurse and still found energy to smile at strangers and help friends. She loved Mark without question, but she also longed for the day when he would hold her hand proudly in front of others. She wondered if she was not graceful enough, or not fitting the image his co-workers expected. She knew her skin color made her stand out in spaces he often described as stiff and formal, but she never saw herself as someone who needed to hide. She believed love should open doors, not close them. Mark loved his wife more than he ever expressed, and every time he left her behind he felt a weight settle inside his chest. He told himself he was protecting her from the uncomfortable stares he feared others might give. He told himself he was shielding her from people who made judgments without knowing anything about her, but the truth was he was afraid of confrontation, and afraid that the world he worked in would not accept the life he cherished at home. His fears created a wall that kept her out, and he hated himself for building it, but did not know how to break it. Lena noticed the wall, even if he never spoke about it. She watched other couples leave together for dinners and celebrations, while Mark always chose to leave her behind. She wondered if something about her embarrassed him, but she never allowed the thought to grow too strong because she trusted his love. Still, she could not deny the feeling of being hidden, as if she was a part of his world, only in private, as if the beautiful bond they shared was meant to stay behind their front door. She did not want to pressure him, so she kept her pain quiet and her smile gentle, though her heart waited for a change. One evening Mark came home holding a golden invitation card in his hand. The company was hosting its annual celebration, which was considered the grandest event of the year. Everyone brought their partners, except him. Every year he stood alone in the crowd, pretending it was normal that his wife was never by his side, but this year something felt different. He looked at Lena, who was sitting near the window reading a book, and he felt a sudden rush of courage. He realized he was tired of running from shadows that existed only in his mind. He wanted to do better. He wanted to show her that she was the most important part of his life. Lena looked up when Mark called her name, and she noticed a nervousness in his voice that she had not seen before. He walked closer and handed her the invitation, telling her that he wanted her to come with him this time. For a moment she did not answer. Her heart paused between hope and doubt, because she had imagined this moment many times but never expected it to truly happen. She searched his eyes quietly, trying to understand if he was saying it out of pressure, or if he genuinely wanted her there. Mark held her hand gently and told her he wanted everyone to meet the woman who made his life whole, and slowly Lena allowed herself to smile. She went to her room to get ready and stood in front of her wardrobe wondering what to wear. She wanted to choose something simple yet elegant, something that showed respect without trying too hard. She finally picked a long deep blue dress that flowed softly and carried a quiet charm. She brushed her hair carefully and took a moment to breathe. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she reminded herself that she did not need to impress anyone. She simply needed to be herself, the same woman who loved deeply, worked honestly, and carried kindness wherever she went. When Lena stepped out, Mark felt his breath tighten. She looked graceful in a way that made the entire room feel brighter. He wondered why he had ever allowed fear to hold him back. She had always been the most beautiful presence in his life, and now he wanted the world to see that he reached for her hand not out of habit, but with intention, and they walked out together, as if taking a step into a new chapter. The ride to the event felt different than all the other nights. The silence between them was not heavy anymore. It was filled with quiet excitement and a fragile sense of hope. The event hall was bright with warm lights and soft music. People in elegant clothes walked around greeting one another. Mark hesitated at the entrance for a second, but then squeezed Lena's hand and stepped inside with her by his side. For the first time he did not try to slip into the background. He stood tall with her and introduced her to co-workers who had only heard about her but never met her. Lena smiled softly at everyone and spoke with a calm confidence that made people feel comfortable around her. Her kindness came naturally, and soon people were impressed by her gentle presence. Mark noticed the looks people gave, but they were not harsh or cruel. They were simply surprised, because for years they had never seen the wife he talked about. Some whispered quietly, but not with dislike, rather with curiosity. Lena felt the stares, but she kept her posture steady and her spirit calm. She had walked through harder places in her life, and this room with its fancy lights and polished faces did not shake her. She knew her worth, and she knew That Mark bringing her here was a step forward. She chose to support him as she always had, but this time with more hope than doubt. While Mark spoke with a colleague, Lena walked away for a moment to admire the decorations. She enjoyed the soft music and the glow of the chandeliers. She knew events like this were not her usual environment, but she liked seeing how different people celebrated their achievements. When she turned to walk back toward Mark, something shifted in the room. People looked at her not with judgment, but with a quiet admiration. Her blue dress caught the light in a soft shimmer, and her calm expression made her stand out in the most graceful way. Mark was in the middle of a conversation when he looked across the hall and saw her walking toward him. The lights behind her created a gentle glow around her, and for the first time he truly saw what everyone else was seeing. He saw her strength, her beauty, her dignity, and he wondered how he had ever kept her hidden. She looked like she belonged in every room she stepped into, and he could not take his eyes off her. Something inside him changed in that moment, not with noise but with a deep, quiet realization. He had been afraid of nothing all along. He had only been holding back someone who should have been standing proudly beside him from the beginning. Lena walked back toward Mark with a soft smile on her face and her steps graceful and steady, and people near her paused their conversations to look at her, not because she seemed out of place, but because her presence carried a calm strength that drew attention without effort. Mark watched her, as if seeing a new world unfold, and his heart filled with pride mixed with regret. He had spent years hiding her from rooms like this, yet here she was shining without trying. He felt a wave of guilt, but he also felt a deep relief because now he knew he would never leave her behind again. Lena reached him, and he gently took her hand, as if anchoring himself to the moment he had waited too long to create. Mark introduced her to more colleagues, and each time he spoke her name he tried to hide the tremble in his voice. He wanted her to know that he was not ashamed of her, that his past choices were made out of fear, not lack of love. Lena sensed his nervousness and squeezed his hand lightly to reassure him. Her smile stayed warm, and her voice gentle. Whenever she talked to someone she found ways to connect with them through simple conversations and thoughtful questions. Some people looked surprised by her kindness, and others looked disappointed in themselves for assuming she might be different from them. She carried herself with such dignity that everyone felt a silent respect rise inside them. One woman named Clara, who worked closely with Mark, approached them with curiosity. She had always wondered why Mark never brought his wife, though she had heard many positive things. Clara greeted Lena with a friendly smile, and Lena responded with warmth. Clara soon found herself admiring Lena's calm nature, and the way she made the conversation feel effortless. She later realized that Mark had not kept Lena away because of anything lacking in her, but because he had been afraid of the world's reaction. Clara felt sympathy for both of them for the time they had lost, but also joy that the barrier had finally broken. As Lena and Clara talked, Mark watched them with a quiet sense of wonder. He realized how easily Lena connected with people, and how naturally she made them feel comfortable. He thought about all the moments she could have been by his side, all the times she could have helped him face these rooms with confidence instead of avoiding them. He felt frustrated with himself for letting fear control him, but he also knew he could not change the past. He could only change every moment from now on, and he was determined to show her through his actions that she would never be hidden again. While Mark spoke with a coworker, Lena slowly walked toward the refreshment table. She wanted to get a small drink and give Mark space to talk freely. As she stood there, a group of people nearby whispered softly. Though she could not hear their words, she sensed their curiosity, but she did not let it unsettle her. She reminded herself that curiosity was natural, and she did not owe anyone an explanation for who she was. She picked up a glass of juice and took a slow breath, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness at being in this new environment. She told herself she deserved to be here as much as anyone else. As she turned, she noticed a man named Daniel, someone who had worked with Mark for years but had never met her before. Daniel gave her a warm smile and introduced himself politely. He said he had heard so much about her and always wondered why she never attended events. Lena smiled softly and said she had been busy, but she was happy to come tonight. Though she did not say more, Daniel nodded with understanding and sensed that the truth was deeper, but he respected her privacy. He asked her about her work at the clinic, and they had a thoughtful conversation about the challenges and joys of helping people. Lena felt relieved that someone asked her about her own work instead of only asking about Mark. Meanwhile, Mark glanced around the room and saw Lena speaking with Daniel, and he felt proud, but also slightly nervous. He knew Daniel was kind, but he worried if Lena felt comfortable enough in these surroundings. He excused himself from the conversation he was in and walked toward her. As he reached her side, Lena gently placed her hand on his arm and smiled at him, telling him that she was fine and enjoying the evening. His shoulders relaxed and he nodded, feeling grateful that she was able to find her own space among strangers. He realized she had always been this strong. he had just never given her the chance to show it in this world. As the evening went on, Mark introduced Lena to his manager, a tall man named Robert who had always been professional but distant. Robert shook Lena's hand and said he had heard good things about her, but this time Mark felt something shift inside him. He no longer allowed nervousness to guide his words. He proudly told Robert about Lena's work, her dedication, and how deeply she cared for people. Robert listened with interest and seemed genuinely impressed. Lena spoke with humility and grace, and even Robert, who rarely smiled, offered her a respectful compliment. This moment made Mark feel like he had finally stepped into the kind of husband he wanted to be for her. They moved through the hall together, talking to different groups of people, and slowly Lena felt the tension inside her ease. She realized that though this environment was new to her, she could navigate it with her own strength. She noticed that some people who first looked surprised were now smiling at her and engaging in conversations, and she understood that sometimes people reacted before thinking, but their reactions could change once they saw her for who she truly was. Mark stayed close to her, though he also gave her the space she needed to breathe and explore the room. He felt lighter than he had in years, as if he had finally stopped running from his own fears. After some time, the company announced a short speech and everyone gathered near the stage. Mark stood beside Lena as the lights dimmed slightly. The manager thanked employees for their hard work and spoke about the importance of unity, respect, and supporting one another. Lena listened quietly and felt the words sink into her heart. She wished these values were always followed in real life, but she also felt hopeful because she could see real moments of respect growing around her. Tonight, Mark looked at her during the speech, and his heart softened even more. He realized that he had let assumptions shape his choices instead of trusting the world to meet Lena with fairness. When the speech ended, the music started again, and the crowd began to move more freely. Lena stepped aside for a moment to catch her breath and look around the hall. She admired the warm lights, the soft golden glow reflected on the glass decorations, and the gentle movement of people around her. All of it felt new but not overwhelming. She realized she could belong anywhere if she carried herself with honesty and grace. Behind her, Mark approached and asked softly if she was enjoying herself. She nodded and said she was happy he brought her tonight, and Mark felt a rush of relief and gratitude. As she stood near the edge of the hall, a woman who had been quietly observing her earlier approached with a gentle expression. Her name was Helen, and she said she wanted to apologize if she had seemed distant earlier. She explained that she was surprised because Mark always came alone, and she had never imagined the woman he kept away would be so warm and graceful. Lena smiled kindly and said she understood sometimes people need time to adjust. Helen nodded and thanked her for being patient. The brief conversation made Lena realize that people were learning tonight not only about her, but also about the assumptions they had carried for years. Mark saw the exchange and felt emotional because he realized how powerful Lena's quiet strength was. She did not try to change people, she simply allowed them to see her true self, and that was enough. She had the kind of presence that softened hearts without speaking loudly. She had the kind of dignity that invited respect without demanding it, and Mark knew he had spent too long underestimating how the world would receive her when the world simply needed a chance to meet her. The night was far from over, but already everything felt changed. Lena no longer felt like an outsider looking in. Mark no longer felt like a man running from shadows. They stood together in the middle of the hall, surrounded by people who were slowly beginning to understand the bond between them, and Mark knew that the moment he saw Lena across the room earlier was only the beginning. There was still more to unfold, and the night held many emotions yet to come. The crowd moved with easy laughter as the music grew livelier, and the hall felt brighter than before, but Lena's attention was not on the decorations or the celebration. Her focus stayed on Mark because she could see a calmness in him that had never been there at past events. He had always returned home tense or withdrawn, but tonight he seemed open, lighter, and almost relieved. Being beside her changed something in him, and she could feel it. She watched the way he talked to people with more confidence and how he no longer tried to keep himself small in the room. He stood straight with a quiet pride, and Lena felt her heart soften as she saw the growth happening right before her eyes. Mark guided Lena toward a small seating area so they could rest for a moment, and he gently placed a hand on her back as they walked. He wanted her to feel safe and included. She sat down, and he joined her, taking a slow breath while looking around at the people who now viewed him differently. Some of them were used to seeing him alone, and now seeing him with someone so graceful changed their impression. Without words being spoken, Mark realized that hiding Lena had not only hurt her, but it had also created an incomplete picture of his life, a picture that made him seem distant and guarded. But now people were seeing a fuller side of him, and he felt grateful for the transformation. A few colleagues approached them with friendly smiles wanting to talk more with Lena. One of them was a younger employee named Mira who admired how calm and elegant Lena looked. Mira sat with them and said she hoped to one day carry herself with the same confidence. Lena smiled kindly and told her that confidence was not something people were born with, but something they learned every time they stood firm through difficult moments. Mira listened closely and felt comforted by Lena's gentle wisdom. Mark watched them talk and felt proud that Lena was touching people's hearts without even trying. Her kindness was something rare, and he now understood how deeply the world needed people like her. After Mira left to join her friends, Lena noticed a change in the crowd around them. More people were smiling at her instead of staring with confusion, and several even waved politely whenever she looked their way. This made her feel more at ease, though she still understood that not every thought in the room was kind. She had lived long enough to know that some people took time to see others clearly, but even those people kept their distance instead of showing any open disrespect, and that was enough. For her, she believed in meeting people where they stood and giving them space to grow their understanding over time. Mark asked if she wanted to walk around again, and she agreed. They moved through the hall together, and he held her hand more naturally now, as if he finally felt free to show the love he had once hidden. Lena noticed how gently he introduced her each time, and how he made sure she was never left alone in a group of strangers. She appreciated the effort, because she knew it came from a place of genuine care, not fear. He was learning how to be better, and she respected the steady improvement she could see in him. At one point, a senior employee named Oliver approached them. He was known for being blunt, and often unaware of how his words affected others. Mark tensed slightly as Oliver walked toward them, but Lena remained calm. Oliver greeted Mark, and then turned to Lena, and said he had never seen her at any of the events, and wondered why Mark had not brought her before. Mark opened his mouth to answer, but Lena gently rested her hand on his arm, and spoke first. She said she had been busy with her work, but she was glad to finally attend and meet everyone. Oliver nodded, though his eyes lingered on her a moment longer than necessary, but Lena did not shift or look away. She held her ground with silent strength, and Oliver eventually smiled in a polite way before walking away. Mark turned to her in concern, asking if Oliver's tone had bothered her. She assured him she was fine, and that she had dealt with similar moments throughout her life. He admired her bravery, but also felt a renewed determination to protect her, though he now understood that protecting her did not mean hiding her. It meant standing beside her proudly, and facing the world together. He promised himself he would never again let fear guide him. He wanted to support her openly, just as she had supported him freely from the beginning. As they walked toward the opposite side of the hall, they came across a small photo corner where guests were taking pictures together. Lena hesitated, thinking they might not belong in that part of the celebration, but Mark encouraged her gently, and asked if she wanted to take a picture with him. She smiled softly, and agreed. As they stood in front of the camera, Mark placed his arm around her shoulders, and she rested her hand on his chest. The photographer asked them to smile, and the moment felt tender and honest. It felt like a memory being captured, not only for the event, but for the journey they were taking together. When the picture was taken, Mark looked at the screen and felt a tightness in his throat. The image showed them standing close with peaceful expressions, as if they belonged in that room completely. Lena looked beautiful and confident, and Mark looked proud and steady. He realized the picture represented something deeper. It represented the moment he finally accepted that love should never be hidden, and that fears lose power when faced with truth. Lena smiled at the picture too, though she felt her heart swell more from seeing Mark's peaceful expression than from seeing her own image. As they left the photo area, a sudden announcement echoed through the hall telling guests that dinner was ready, and the crowd began moving toward the tables. Mark guided Lena to their seats, but before they reached the table, a soft voice called out to Lena. She turned and found Helen, the woman who had apologized earlier, smiling warmly. She said that the table next to theirs had an empty seat, and asked if Lena would like to sit with her for a while. Lena thanked her but said she would sit with Mark because they had spent so many events apart that she wanted to be near him tonight. Helen understood completely, and admired the gentle loyalty in her words. Helen then invited both of them to join her table instead, and Mark nodded happily, accepting her offer. During dinner, Lena found herself surrounded by people who now viewed her with genuine interest. She shared small stories from her work, from her childhood, and from her hobbies, and people listened closely, as if seeing a side of Mark's life they had never imagined. Mark also felt lighter during the dinner than he ever had before. He talked more openly, shared jokes, and found himself laughing in ways he rarely did at work events. Lena's presence made him feel braver and more connected to the room around him. Her warmth spread to the people near her, and the table felt filled with a gentle energy that brought comfort to everyone. As dessert arrived, Helen leaned forward and said she thought Lena had a special way of bringing people together, and Lena simply smiled, saying she believed kindness always traveled farther than expected. Mark looked at her with admiration growing in his eyes. He knew she was right. He had spent so much time fearing the reaction of others that he forgot how powerful kindness could be in breaking walls and building new bonds. He felt grateful for every moment of this evening because it showed him truths he had been blind to for too long. As the night moved deeper into soft music and quiet conversations, Mark and Lena stood up to stretch their legs. Once again they walked toward a balcony area where cool air drifted in from outside. The moment they stepped out, Lena inhaled deeply, feeling refreshed by the calm breeze. Mark looked at her and felt his heart swell with a warmth he could not describe. He reached for her hand, and she gave it to him without hesitation. Their fingers intertwined naturally, and the silence between them felt full and peaceful. Mark finally spoke with a gentle honesty, saying he was sorry for all the years he had left her behind. He said he had been afraid of reactions, afraid someone might say something unkind, and afraid he would not know how to protect her in those moments. Lena listened quietly without interrupting. She knew how hard this confession was for him. He said he now understood that hiding her had never been protection, it had only been avoidance, and he felt ashamed of the fear he had let guide him for so long. Lena squeezed his hand softly and told him that she was glad he was learning and growing. She said she never needed him to be perfect, she only needed him to be honest and willing to improve. She told him that tonight proved he was becoming the man she always believed he could be. Mark felt her words wash over him with comfort and gratitude. He held her hands and thanked her for being patient, for believing in him even when he doubted himself. As they stood there under the soft night breeze, something gentle and powerful passed between them, a promise formed without needing words, a moment that told them both that their journey together was changing, not breaking, but strengthening through understanding, honesty, and courage. The cool air on the balcony wrapped around Mark and Lena as they stood close together, and for a few moments neither of them spoke. They simply allowed the peaceful silence to settle between them. The soft music from inside drifted out through the open doors, mixing with the sound of gentle night wind beyond the balcony. The city lights glowed with a calm shimmer. Mark looked at Lena with a new depth in his eyes, a look that carried gratitude, apology, and love. All at once, Lena felt the sincerity in his gaze, and it softened her heart more than any words could. After a while, Mark asked if she was ready to return inside, and she nodded. He placed a hand on her back, and they walked in together, feeling more connected than ever before. The hall was still full of life, people talking, laughing, and enjoying the evening, but something had shifted around them now. Many of the faces in the room showed familiarity and warmth instead of curiosity. Lena no longer felt like a stranger in a world she did not belong to. She felt a sense of quiet acceptance growing around her, and she realized how powerful it was to simply show up and be herself. As they walked back to their table, Helen waved them over, asking if they wanted to join her group again. Lena smiled and agreed, and Mark followed her with a gentle pride in his step. The small group welcomed them warmly, and the conversation flowed easily. Helen asked Lena about her work again, wanting to hear more stories from the clinic, and Lena shared a moment when she had comforted a scared child during a long night shift. Her voice carried tenderness as she described how a simple touch or soft word could bring strength to someone who felt alone. The group listened closely, deeply moved by the compassion she carried in her heart. Mark watched the admiration in their faces and felt a quiet joy rise in him. He realized this was the Lena he always knew, the one who could calm storms with her presence and lift heavy hearts with simple kindness, and he felt regret for ever thinking she did not belong here. She belonged anywhere she chose to stand, and he silently promised himself he would never again allow fear to make small choices in their lives. He would stand with her in every room proudly and openly because she deserved nothing less. As the night continued, the host announced a small activity, encouraging guests to take a moment to share something meaningful about someone who had supported them in the past year. People volunteered one by one, sharing stories about co-workers, friends, or family members. Lena did not expect to be part of this moment, and Mark did not plan to speak, but when the host called for a final volunteer, Mark felt something inside him push forward. People turned their heads as he stood up slowly, and the room grew quiet with curiosity. Because Mark was known for being reserved, this was the first time many had ever seen him willing to speak in front of a crowd. He took a breath and looked at Lena before speaking. She felt her pulse quicken as she saw emotion behind his eyes. He began by saying he wanted to talk about someone who had given him more strength than he ever deserved, someone who had been patient with him even when he made choices out of fear, not wisdom. He spoke about Lena without mentioning her name at first, describing her calm nature, her kindness, and her unwavering support. As he continued, the room grew more silent. Everyone listened closely, because his voice, though gentle, carried a deep sincerity. Those who knew him, but also those who had never expected to see his vulnerable side. After the small activity, the music shifted to something slow and calming, and several couples began moving to the dance floor. Lena hesitated, but Mark turned to her and asked softly if she wanted to dance. She had not danced in years, especially not in a crowd, but the sincerity in his eyes made her nod gently. He guided her to the dance floor and placed one hand on her waist while holding her other hand with a quiet respect. Lena rested her hand lightly on his shoulder, and they began to move slowly with the rhythm of the music. The dance floor was surrounded by warm lights that created a soft golden glow around them. Lena felt the movement of the dance settle something inside her, as if all the doubts and old hurts were slipping away with each step. Mark kept his eyes on her face, watching her relax into the moment, and he felt a strong affection rise inside him. He whispered that he was proud of her and grateful for her patience, and she told him she was proud of him too, because tonight he faced a fear that had controlled him for years, and he chose love instead of hiding. They continued dancing for a while, and for the first time they felt like they were not only dancing with each other, but also celebrating a future where honesty and courage would guide their choices instead of hesitation. After the dance, Lena felt a peaceful warmth inside her, and Mark felt the same. They left the dance floor and thanked Helen and others at the table for spending time with them. The group expressed how much they enjoyed talking with Lena and invited both of them to join future events together, which made Lena smile with gratitude. She no longer felt like an outsider, she felt like someone being welcomed into a new part of life. As the night neared its end, the hall grew calmer. People began leaving with soft goodbyes and satisfied smiles. Mark and Lena gathered their things and walked toward the exit, but before stepping out, Lena paused and looked back at the room she had once feared and wondered about. She realized that this one night changed many things. It showed her that she could walk into any place with strength and grace. It showed her that some hearts change slowly, but they still change, and most importantly, it showed her that Mark was ready to stand beside her without hesitation. When they stepped into the quiet night, Mark wrapped his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into him, feeling safe and seen in a way she had not felt for a long time. He told her he wanted this night to be the beginning of something new, something honest and strong. She nodded and told him that love grows best when two people choose courage together. They walked to the car hand in hand with a calm joy settling over them, understanding that this night was not just a company event, it was a turning point, a moment when fear loosened its hold and love stepped forward with confidence.